job easier? That'll have the first question, Brittany. To help us all.
I haven't had any issues really recently, and every appraiser is different. You know, I like to get information from the real estate agents because, I mean, you guys have been working with the clients, you've been working in the neighborhood. You know, if you have things, I never mind taking, you know, comps that you may have used that may not be seen if I'm looking or whatever. I mean, because if we're in a neighborhood, we're in a neighborhood. If it's a little bit more complex, you're going out the neighborhood, you're looking at things differently. But yeah, I mean, for me, I haven't had many issues. So it's just kind of, you know, just knowing anything about the house that would need to be known, any updates, upgrades, changes, things like that, that aren't just seen by the eye while I'm there.
Okay. You, other question I have, has there been much changes during COVID how you do? I mean, are you doing any drive-by appraisals or?
So I have only had to do maybe a handful of the drive-by, the exterior ones, and that South Carolina Federal, I think, is one of the only ones that went that way. If you hear my dog bark, he sees, I'm trying, he sees things. So South Carolina Federal is the only one that actually did the exterior only, which I'm glad, because it's really hard to do an exterior only appraisal properly because you can't get in there, you can't do the actual measurements, you can't see the changes, but they would send pictures from the borrowers so that we could at least kind of see some, you know, some of the interior. But yeah, other than that, everybody else was still interior, exterior.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, I'm gonna open up to y'all's questions. You know, this was a highly, I'm curious what question you have. This was a highly recommended training period, so open it up.
Hey, Brittany, this is Kevin. Just a question on permitted versus unpermitted work. Does it matter on an appraisal?
So it does matter.
Okay.
And that's more on the lender side, because I mean, for us, as long as it's within the same kind of workmanship as the rest of the house and it's heated and cooled properly and everything like that, can be insured, we can count it. But a lot of lenders will come back and ask, hey, do they have the permits? And if it's not permitted, then technically it can't be counted because the county doesn't even know about it. So that's where it kind of gets a little in the gray area there.
Mm-hmm.
So permits are always, yeah, definitely. I always ask if they say, oh, we turned this into this, or we added this room. I'm like, did you have permits? You know, and 9 times out of 10, thank goodness they do. But if they don't, sometimes I'll just kind of put it in there and let it ride and see if anybody wants to make a stink about it. But that's another appraisal, you know, each appraiser does it differently.
What kind of red flags for us permits? I mean, at what point do you ask about the permit? If you see an addition or if you see
any addition, yeah. As long if it adds to the square footage, because that is one of your biggest adjustments almost is your square footage. So if it adds to square footage and it's not the same as what the county is showing, the lenders always look at the county records compared to what we're putting in there for square footage. And they'll ask, you know, where's this big difference coming from? And was it permitted?
Now, Kevin, yours is renovation, not square footage addition, right? When you're asking.
Yeah, we didn't add any square footage to it. It's just inside. It's a little different.
Yeah, inside, it's typically not a big deal. I don't think I've ever had anybody ask if there were permits for any interior renovations, even when things are taken down to the stud, because I'll put that in the report. I'll say it's taken down to the studs, everything's new. And I usually don't get asked.
Yeah, I had an agent ask me yesterday, kind of threw me off a little bit.
Yeah, and that may just have been for their buyer or whoever. Yeah. I guess it was a buyer's agent asking you that. Mm-hmm. That may just have been wanting to know it was done correctly or something on their end.
Yeah.
How about decks or patios, anything like that while we're talking about permits?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, just square footage.
Yeah, that's the only thing I've run across. I've been doing the appraisals for 14 years, and that's about the only time that anybody has come up and asked anything about permits is when it has to do with square footage.
Good opening question, Kevin. I wasn't even sure on that one. That's good.
All right, I got a question for you, Brittany. This is Mike, by the way. You can't see me. I'm hiding off the camera.
Gotcha.
But if an appraisal comes back 10, 20 grand under, right? What the offer was,
Yeah.
right? And what it was, listed for, et cetera. And there is a discrepancy with the appraisal when everybody looks at it later, but the appraiser refuses to change it. What is our course of action? Like, who do we get to talk to? Is there a governing body, or who do we talk to change that because a room's not counted properly? Or as an example, it came back under appraisal, I think because they couldn't go in the attic or something crazy like that, but the attic was accessible. And who do you go to when those things happen?
Non-VA question. VA, God knows.
Yeah, right. Yeah, who knows? Let's see here. So, I mean, if the appraiser is just flat out refusing to look at that and correct it, which is crazy to me, then if they're working for a company, you would go for, whoever is the owner of their company. I work for myself, so it's just me. Other than that, you'd have to go through the state and just file a complaint and or a dispute of some kind for it to be reviewed and looked over.
Now, I know lenders would have the same question. Is there any way, so lenders are completely, I think this is the case, beholden to the appraisal, even if it's viewed as incorrect or disputed, correct? Right?
No, I mean, they can order another one. I mean, if they're just, rather than waiting to go through the whole process, just order another one through a different appraiser. And then, you've got another appraiser going out there and appraising it one way, and then this one appraising another way. I mean, they can always do that.
Okay. Now, remember, especially our newer guys, when we are representing a seller, and we have multiple offers, that's why sometimes if it's $1,000 or a few $100 or a couple $1,000 apart, that we explain to our sellers the difference between a conventional FHA appraiser compared to a VA appraiser. As y'all can tell, Brittany does, and let me go ahead and stop now to the side. She also does private work. So if you have a seller that wants an appraisal, or you have a property that's rural, a tough spot, she would love to take private work, right, Brittany?
Right.
So go ahead and take her. She can give you her information, her cell phone number, her email address. And so I know a lot of times we'll send out in our group chat, hey, does anyone know an appraiser that works in St. George? She may work in St. George, I don't know.
I don't go that far. But I can get you somebody who does.
Yeah, she's taking her time out of this, just out of goodness of her heart, to help us out. So everyone write her down and utilize her, and I'm sure she'd appreciate it. But
Yeah,
let's
absolutely.
make them all a point. Explain these guys, VA guys, RF, you can tell Brittany would work with us if there was discrepancies. That's common on conventional FHA guys. But our VA guys, a lot of times, as y'all know, they won't budge, period, even if they're showing wrong. And you go through their legal system or governing system, I guess, better way to put it, and it's still good luck, buttercup. So
Yeah, I don't get it. It drives me nuts.
and it really gives appraisers a bad name in general. But anyway, so just as an aside for our newer guys, when you get multiple offers, of course, financing matters, period. But the type of financing really matters. Now, I don't want to kill VA loans either, because the good thing about VA loans, and this is not an appraisal side, they're very streamlined. You very rarely see VA loans fall apart other than appraisal issues. So I'm not trying to hurt on VA loans. I'm just saying value, if it's going to be tight, that you're really pushing the market, and explain that to your seller and give them a proper expectation. Good question by Kevin. Sorry about my side. Just good to learn for especially our newer guys that haven't fought these battles. What questions else do we have for Brittany? Those are two good questions. Let me think of all the questions.
Anybody else have questions? Trying to think of anything that I've come across with agents recently doing private ones. But I can't really think of anything.
How about when we do have you said, I don't know if you do rural properties at all, but or even not rural, somewhere that's really not a comp for it. How do we help you come up to a value that we need?
So that also comes into a discussion. I'm always open for discussion. I'm one of the appraisers that are totally open. I'll sit there and talk with the agent on site when I'm doing like a private one to get ready for listing or whatever, you know, and we have a discussion, you know, what did they look at? What are they thinking? You know, whatever. And then I'll explain to them why or why not something may be used, and where I would have to look within my guidelines and parameters. So when you get rural, it's so different. I mean, you know, guidelines say stick within a mile, but when you go out there, you can kind of go up to like 5 miles. Sometimes I've had to go 10, 15 miles out for comps, and you just have to really explain it in your addendum as to why you had to do it. Like, you know, explain the market, because a lot of these underwriters and things, they don't know where you're at, you know, so you have to explain that this is extremely common in the area. You know, you've got large acreage, you've got a custom house, you've got whatever the issue may be. And you have to just, as long as you explain it to the underwriters to where they can understand where you're at and what the market is like out there, it's usually fine.
Cool. If you can't find comps, there's periods that really can't, how do you determine value?
So that's where it's tough. But you just have to dig until you can find at least 3. You just need at least 3. So, yep, just hope and dig and dig and dig. And, you know, if you're in a market, and like I said, I haven't really been rural lately because it's been so busy here locally that I haven't had to go out. So it's been, I mean, since January, you guys know how it's been. It's been insane.
Especially refis, right? Refis are helping you a lot.
Right. It has just been crazy. But so it's been probably since last year since I went anywhere rural. You can even go to like a similar market. So it doesn't, just because it's like, if it were in St. George or something, you can go to like Cross or St. Stephen's or wherever, you know. I'm not even just throwing stuff out there, you know, like when I used to go to Walterboro, you could go to Roundo, you could do stuff like that, you know, as long as they're similar in what your buyer would be looking for. So if your buyer's looking for a rural property with country, whatever, yada, yada, as long as the buyer would also be looking in this location as like a principal substitution type of thing, then you're good. And explain it. Does that make sense?
That's really interesting. I don't think, because my next question was going to be for when we're trying to do our own values, and we have those, you know, I'm glad you've done it in the past, that random, you know, custom built house on 7 acres in Roundo.
Right.
That you, as far as values, whenever there's good luck trying to find something in Baltimore or wherever it is,
Right.
you can actually go to, let's say, St. Stephen's, a similar price point market.
Right. Yeah, as long as it's similar kind of in price point, land values are somewhat similar. And if not, we would adjust for land values. But yeah, you kind of got to put your mind into the mind of the buyer, which you guys are good at doing. So, you know, it's like, if the buyer's looking here, are they also going to be looking here? Or would that totally area be just off their market? Like, no.
That's a really good point, Brittany. I teach a CMA class, which I hate teaching because, you know, as I tell people all the time, a lot of it's, unfortunately, y'all, you know, appraisers have to look at it as a science. I mean, you have to back up what you say. But as agents, since we're doing unofficial CMAs, then a lot of times we can do the value purely off of, you know, I'd say it's more of an art. So, but that's a good point. You know, put your mind in the eye as a buyer, or and then go from there.
Yeah, so that's where you kind of have to get a little bit creative in your thinking on the appraisal side.
Okay, I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, guys, questions y'all wanted? Here
Mary,
she is.
Mary, what's up? You got your hand raised.
I do. I had a little bit of trouble trying to add value to a horse farm. It did not have a picket fence. It had electric, but it had an arena. What do you go by as far as putting value on the land and like an arena for a horse show, that type of thing?
All right, so that one is extremely difficult because I have not had to do anything like that. But that would also be just trying to find another property that has something the same or very similar. I mean, it sounds like that's pretty fancy and like they're set up for shows, like you said. So I don't know how you'd be able to find anything exactly like it, but if you found something similar, and then you just kind of have to extract it from the comparable one that you're looking at, or the comparable one or two. But those are tough. I haven't had to do any of those. So yeah, it's definitely just finding something as close or similar as you can, looking at land values. A lot of times you can pull the tax records and see what the land values are and compare the land values, and that'll kind of help you there. You could pull the market area around it for the land values and compare them that way. But when it comes to the actual barn and the arena and things like that, you can kind of take into consideration how much they put into it. Of course, that gets into a gray area because it's never dollar for dollar. You guys know how that is. But if there's nothing else out there like that, like not even one, then I'm going to look at, okay, how much did they invest in this? And then kind of just try to extract it from the market as well as I can. That's a tough one. I don't know if that gives you any kind of answer at all, but those are a few different things you can look at to try to figure out a value to kind of put on that.
Well, how do you value like the barns and the individual stables for the horses?
So the barns are a little bit easier because in rural areas, there's other places that have barns. And so what we're looking at there is to make sure the barns are similar in quality and size and things like that. But we don't get down into like how many stables or how, that's just too much. That gets too nitpicky to break it down on the appraisal side. So we're really just looking at the overall quality of the barn, the overall size of the barn, make sure that it, if somebody has 10 horses, that this one can fit 10 horses or 8 horses. I mean, we can't get very specific. But that's what you're looking at is size and quality mostly in any of those exterior buildings that are built.
Thank you.
At some point, when we have these kind of properties, I think too, Mary, we spoke, I don't know if you were on yet with, Brittany on independent appraisals. Sometimes, as much as I hate spending our sellers' money, it gets to a point if you've got a large horse property or something of that nature, especially if it could be a higher end property of equestrian farm, whatever it is, to where we suggest that our seller, hires an appraiser to find that value. And we collaborate with the appraisal, seller, us, and the appraiser, since they're not beholden to a mortgage holder at that point. We can all collaborate and come up with a good value. What do you think, Brittany?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's really communication. For me, communication is huge. You've got to be able to talk about these things, especially if it's an independent one. It's way more difficult if it's through the lender. But anything independent, communication is key.
Chelsea, raise your hand. Or Mary, are you done?
Hey,
Yeah, I was going to ask one more question about swimming pools.
Okay.
And I have heard they don't add really that much value to the property. Is that true?
So that's a yes and a no. It does add value because there's a swimming pool there. But that's another place where you kind of have to put your mind in the view of the buyer. Some buyer may come there and they love the house, but they don't care about a pool or they don't want the upkeep of a pool. Some people may really want a pool. You also look at the neighborhood. Does the neighborhood have a pool? If the neighborhood has a pool, then having your own private pool is a little bit extra. So it's kind of like less in value, because a buyer is going to be like, well, I have a neighborhood pool. You know, what do I need to spend an extra 20 grand on a house just because it has its own pool? But that way, that's a little bit easier to figure out, because you have the comps to look at, like next to each other, that are more similar if you're in a neighborhood, and you can figure out how much it actually adds. And, you know, depends on the area, depends on, you know, if you're on Daniel Island or if you're out at Kiowa or somewhere like that, compared to if you're just in, you know, a neighborhood in Summerville, like my parents live in Pine Forest. You know, it's going to be way different, because you've got a different quality, you've got different materials, you've got the neighborhood pools. So I don't know if that.
Yeah, that answers. Yeah, thank you. That does.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with the question I was going to ask. So I've got a listing coming up, and they have an above ground pool with a deck. I was always told that really, especially an above ground pool, that doesn't add any value.
Only in-ground pools will add value to the appraisal.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Now, I will say, you know, as far as we're speaking of appraisal world, and then I have a buyer, Michelle, if you have, and we'll say a neighborhood that's in Summerville, that's a below 200,000, we'll say, and it has a nice above ground pool with a big deck around it. My experience is that your pool of buyers will be more likely to want it and pay for more money for that property than, you know, if you had that in Pine Forest, and that's not going to play. I mean, you wouldn't get it.
Right. If you had it in like Sangaree, I've got friends that live in Sangaree. If you've got an above ground pool that's really nice and has the deck and everything, in Sangaree, but that's where the real estate and the appraisal world kind of mixes and walks that fine line, you know, so you won't get it on the appraisal end, but as long as it's not overpriced on the listing end, then you'll probably get a little extra for it.
And that'd be a good example of, you know, VA may not be the
Yeah. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I have a maybe a strange question for you.
Okay.
Okay. Alternate building materials for a house, right? So like panels, right? Those houses now, the modular homes that are built with insulated panels, shipping container homes, and then now people are turning barns into, I guess, this thing called like a barndominium or something ridiculous now. How does any of that affect appraisals, or can they be appraised? Or, I mean, is it a lower value because you built your house out of insulated panels versus stick built, or shipping containers versus stick built, or a steel barn turned into a house?
That's one that I probably won't be able to help you with, because I have not come across that yet. The modular homes, they're compared to stick built homes. I mean, you know, they're with the same kind of material. They're just brought in pieces and put together. So modular homes are very similar to stick built homes, and that's what we compare them to. But the shipping container homes and the barn, you know, whatever homes, it's like, I haven't had to deal with that. I mean, have you guys seen that around here yet? Because I have not seen that around.
As an example, we have a gentleman in our other office. He's not on today, but I know he has an investor. He's looking to build like a shipping container, like small community, like a little apartment or community.
Gotcha.
And so I was just curious, like basically, are there any rules even on the books for that type of construction for appraisal, I guess, on that side?
Not that I have seen yet. Now I'm doing my continuing ed right now, so there may be a course in there that they've added. I'll have to go and look and see if they've added a course. But yeah, I have not come across that yet. So
then it kind of goes back to the question, like, say if I built a shipping container home myself for whatever reason, or some type of office space in my backyard,
right,
and with a shipping container, and it's over the square footage where I had to get a permit, I got it permitted, that would be, I'm assuming, one of the only ones in, I mean, a good distance from around here. So how then would that be
Right.
appraised as far as added value or not? Or
So in your scenario that you just threw at me, and let me know if I misunderstood it, you were giving an example of like if you added one on your own property as to use as like an office space or extra space of some sort, right?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. So it won't add square footage. Anything that's a separate dwelling
Okay.
it won't add square footage because it's a separate home. Just like when you've got homes, I don't know how much you guys do on Daniel Island. I keep going there just because I do a lot there, but they've got the detached garages with the suites above. You can't add it in the overall square footage. It has to be counted differently as a guest suite on the grid. So a lot of times you'll see it on the square footage that it's a 4,000 square foot house, when in reality it's only 3,500 square feet and the above garage is 500 square feet. So it's counted differently, but in your scenario, it would be counted differently also. And that's where you would almost just have to find something that also has another building built. And if it were me doing it, because there's not a lot of people doing shipping container stuff yet, I would just have to find something that has another office space or space that could be used as an office that's built in, on the property somewhere too, and just kind of compare them there, and then maybe give it a little bit more because of the material.
Got it. So it's okay. So because I know material is part of your concern, but at this point, it's more of the function.
Right.
Trying to compare the two functions of the buildings then.
Right.
Okay.
Good. As a side, guys, speaking of Daniel Island, that does have the detached garages with the living space ahead of them. I've always encouraged you guys to, it's better sometimes to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. As far as the MLS goes, we're trying to push values for our sellers. I've always been a big fan of saying, yep, 4,000 square foot home for as the general description, but somewhere in your, I'll put agent notes as well as remarks saying this is including the detached area. So we're not.
And if you can put that square footage in there, what it is, that's super helpful. Otherwise, we got to try to dig it up.
That's great. Yeah, 325 square feet. We're counting that towards it on the detached part.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that question 2-3 times a year from you guys.
Yep.
That's my answer.
So when you do your MLS, the main square footage you put total,
I total
and then in the
detached
notes
part.
you're
Right.
putting okay.
Let's not get crazy about it, guys. If you've got like a weird workshop garage with a window unit, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about something really well done, go ahead and add it to your square footage, because in the eye of a buyer, they're going to consider that space, right?
Right.
So go ahead and put total and then explain it in the remarks. And Brittany's right. It's very helpful if you're like the 300 square foot or 400 square foot, whatever it is.
Right. And then it a lot of times I've had some buyers come back shocked because it shows on the grid their square footage is only 3,500 square foot when they were told it was 4,000. Then I have to explain. I'm like, it's just because
and
this
that
is
way,
separate.
if we put it in remarks, then there's going to be
Right. And if you explain it to your sellers or your buyers or whatever, up front, then that won't shock them either.
right. Disclose. So that'll
Right.
Question on solar panels.
Okay.
I hate solar panels now because of the sorry. I mean, they always, once again, if we have solar panels, guys, let's talk about it early in this contract process, not late, because some of them are leased, some of them are owned. Some of them, the buyer's got to absorb a lease that goes 5 more years. That's a lot of money. So let's talk solar panels early when they happen. As far as an appraisal, do we give any value for that?
You get some value, and the only time the lenders will allow value is if they're owned. They always come back and ask if they're owned or leased. Even if the lease transfers, you can't count them yet. So if they're right. So if they're owned, we can give value, and that value, because it's kind of hit or miss on the areas that like went crazy with solar panels and the areas that just like some people did and some people didn't. So then I take into consideration what the cost was.
Okay. So if they spent $30,000 on solar panels, what generally, and it's in a neighborhood that's hit or miss, what generally value would you give it?
So that's kind of hard to say because you kind of have to, everything's extracted, you know, so you compare apples to apples and everything like that and extract it out. And then take an orange and throw it in there and say, okay, well, it's worth 15 or 20 grand because somebody bought the same exact house without solar panels and it was that much of a difference.
But it's highly unusual that you give them their full value, right?
Right.
Okay. Awesome. And I got some more questions that you might think of later, but if you got something, jump in now.
A financial institution that hires you to go do an appraisal, right? The financial institution is the one who gets to kind of set rules as far as what is considered value or not, correct?
No.
Oh, okay.
Really does. She's
Yeah.
fine.
No, what I meant is what, like, I guess you can add in or count as, so, because you're talking about the difference between a VA versus
Conventional.
a conventional or FHA. So I guess, there's just different guidelines, I'm assuming, on what the value can be, or how does that, what's the difference?
No, yeah, so it's not on what the value can be because that's on us to extract it from the market and figure out what it is. But they do have guidelines on, for example, like we said with the square footage. So VA is going to be a lot stricter. FHA, you can kind of, like if you have a sunroom that has a window unit in it, but it's totally closed off, like it's still a separate place. Some people won't allow that to be added in, and some lenders will. So you kind of have to look at how they, what's my word here? How they took it from like a screen porch or something to a sunroom. So if they just slapped up some windows and it's still really thin, you can still feel the outside air, it's going to be a sunroom. But if it's well insulated and built similar to the house or added on similar to the house, you can definitely add that in square footage. You know, so I always think like, okay, if they left these doors open, are you going to have outside heat, especially in the summer, coming in the house and, you know, making it all humid or whatever, like the interior doors.
Right.
If it's insulated and the little heating and air unit in there is right, then you can use it. But yeah, so we're kind of the ones out there while we're there that have to assess it and think along the lines of a buyer, along the lines of the lender, the underwriters. We kind of have to think of how all they're going to think ahead of the time.
Okay.
Cool.
Mary, what's up? Mary, raise your hand. You're on mute if you're talking.
Mary going once. Mary going twice. Come back to us, Mary, if you still got that question. I know the answer. A lot of our guys don't. It might be interesting to hear your spin on the answer anyway. What is the difference between a modular home and a manufactured home, and how do you determine it?
So the modular home is, like I said, the ones that are already pre-built and they come in the separate little things or whatever, and they get put together. The mobile homes, manufactured homes, they've got the wheels, they've got the panel. You can always tell just looking at the inside because the roof line is going to be different. The interior quality is going to be different. A lot of the modular homes are built just as good or better as a stick-built home, in my opinion, if you're looking at them. And so those are compared to stick-built homes because they're not always listed as modular in the MLS. They're listed as, you know, just regular ranch or traditional or whatever.
For MLS.
What's that?
Homes are considered site-built homes as far as MLS. Just put this.
Right. And then the manufactured homes, we just have to look underneath and make sure the wheels are removed, the hitch and everything is removed so that it can't just be hooked up and rolled off the property. Foundation is under. Those are things you look for in a manufactured home to make sure it can be counted. And the title has to be moved over from a vehicle to residential.
Yep, that's why when you list manufactured homes, make sure that you get with and work on the detailing process early.
Mhm.
Do you look for a HUD tag on the manufactured home or no? You just determine from looking at it?
Yep, we have to. It's in the appraisal. If you're doing a manufactured home, you've got to find the HUD tag and the certificate, which I have not done them in like a year. It's probably been a year since I've done one, so I can't even think of the name of the other certificate. But it's got the manufacturer's information on it, their tag numbers, things like that that have to go in the appraisal. And a lot of times those are removed because the homeowners think they don't need it anymore. So you're like, oh, we really need this information. So
Tell your sellers don't remove the HUD tag. For those who don't know what a HUD tag is, they're on the back of the property, usually in the back right, if you're looking at the back of the property.
Yeah.
Or back of the home, so, sorry. The property.
I finally unmuted my speaker.
There we go.
I was wondering about acreage that used to be a nursery, and it's has zoned commercial very close to the property. Would that add any value? And this property has a well and septic tank to where it's not public water, public sewer, but it could possibly have commercial potential. Would
so
that add?
that's more on the commercial line than a residential, because anything commercial related or potentially commercial related, we just kind of knock right out of our mind because we're not commercial. You know, I'm not a commercial appraiser, so you'd have to reach out to one of them.
Okay. All right. Well, how about as far as property with a well, septic versus property that's connected to public service, water and.
So that's going to depend on the area too. If it's common in the area, then there's really nothing, there's no difference. It's just kind of like a wash. But if it happens to be one of just a few that weren't connected to public water and sewer, then you're going to want to take into consideration, can it be? Because there are certain little areas, like even in Monk's Corner, where it can't be connected. Like they just don't run it there. And then you would do just like a small adjustment. You'd figure it out. We'd have to extract it, and then just do a small adjustment for it to be connected to public water and sewer.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please don't, I told you guys before our self-disclosure training, please don't assume. I mean, there's King Street in downtown Summerville, or not downtown, but right by the high school. It cannot be connected to public sewer. There are little weird pockets in Monk's Corner, Summerville, West Ashley, that it's not available. So don't assume there's public sewer, even though it looks like it really should be.
Yeah.
They'll bite us. I mean, I've once or twice in this company's history, we've had where house sells, it's great, everyone's happy. Our sellers put public sewer, we put it in MLS, and then 6 months later, all of a sudden, their septic tank fills up and goes through the house. It's never So don't assume. We don't know what assume means. Other questions? I've got two more. This should be fairly interesting to hear your opinion. How about we're going to take that Sangaree house. And it's in a subsection Sangaree where your average price range is anywhere from $150 to $225. And they go ahead and they put Brazilian cherry hardwood floors through, granite countertops. The place is, all the light fixtures are very, very top end. How do you deal with over improvement, and how does the values go with that? Now, given that you'll have distressed, beautiful hardwood in Daniel Island, and that's kind of standard, but whenever we add it to our house, and I won't pick on Sangaree because I like Sangaree, but we'll say
Yeah. Right.
how do we add value with that?
So that's where it gets tough, because it is over improved for that neighborhood. If you're doing that kind of a high end remodel or updating or whatever like that, because the chances of you finding another one in there with the same kind of, upgrades is going to be slim to none. So what I do, this is where on the appraisal side, they always say you kind of have to be creative. You have to be open-minded and creative. So I will find the most similar with upgrades, and maybe just value this one a little bit higher because of the material used. but anything too overdone, it's gonna do a red flag for a lender, and they're gonna say it's over improved, and it's gonna cause an issue anyways, no matter how creative we get on our end. So we just have to find the most similar and then just be really smart in our adjustments.
Gotcha. Michelle?
How much value would a half bath add?
That depends on location, depends on quality, all that kind of stuff. But for a standard house, if you're in like a regular, like I live in the peninsula on Clements Ferry Road. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that area. So we're vinyl houses, D.R. Horton back in 2003. Ours are going to be about $2,000 for a half bath.
Okay.
You go to somewhere more custom, you'll probably get about $5,000 for a half bath, but sometimes it could be more, sometimes it could be in between, but that's kind of your general, what you'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. We talked about the over improvement. I think the most frustrating part of us is when we have that, we have we'll say Gadsden. You know what Gadsden is in Summerville, since we finished with Pine Forest, right?
Yeah, which one?
Gadsden. That's where my parents live. No. Summit.
Yes.
Okay. We'll say Gadsden's right beside the Summit across Parsons.
Okay.
Right? You know where the Woodlands is?
Right. Yep.
Either one. Well, either neighbor, doesn't matter.
Okay.
So you have, we'll say in the Summit, what's your average square footage in the Summit's probably like 3,500 square feet or so. A lot of elevated homes. But you've got this little 2,100 square foot ranch.
Mhm.
It's really well done. And knowing that the average price point in Summit, we'll say $450, and price per square foot, this house really should be $310. But because
Mhm.
people want to get in the neighborhood, next thing you know, the purchase price is pushed up to $375. How do we do it? How do we deal with the smallest house in the neighborhood and value that? Knowing that the
Smallest.
buyers will probably want more money than the appraisal will allow.
Right. So that's kind of a tough one. I would almost have to look at that one, but you're going to, as the appraiser, we don't really look at price per square foot as much as you guys depend on price per square foot or lean on it so much, because it changes for us as the adjustments go in. So with that, if it's the smallest house in the neighborhood, but quality similar, conditions similar, any kind of acreage is similar, things like that, correct?
Right. Yeah.
In our scenario?
Just the easiest, it's your easiest price point break in that neighborhood.
Yeah. So really it just comes into adjusting for square footage, because that's one of your biggest ones, any quality difference. And you will probably have to go outside of the neighborhood to find one similar, just to bracket it. Everything has to be bracketed for us. Square footage, bedroom, bathroom count, things like that. Sales price even has to be bracketed, which is crazy. So yeah, that one would just kind of be looking at the overall area. And like a similar neighborhood. So like we said, you'd have to go outside the neighborhood, but find one that's a buyer would also be looking in there.
Yeah.
Does that help?
It does. And as you guys know, that with my CMA class, don't get square footitis. I hate that. Once again, it's art, it's not science. Our engineers, sorry to pick on you, Kevin, you're an engineer, but we can't just plug in numbers and make it work, which I know you don't, but because you just when you put your prices, you should have. But yeah, don't get square footitis.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, guys?
I got a question on that. If we wanted to have somebody come out and do it for us, is there somebody particularly licensed to measure square footage that we need to have, or just?
If you're just looking for square footage, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, I do come out and just measure, and it's a lower fee. But yeah, I mean, I know there's people out there that do it, just retired appraisers or whatever that do it. I do it. Other people do it, as long as we can squeeze it into our schedule.
Okay. And does your fee depend on house size?
Yes, but it's usually pretty standard. But if it's like something 4,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet, it's got all these different dormers and things like that need to be measured and taken out and stuff like that, it takes a little bit longer. So it's basically just on the time I'll be there, but it's pretty standard. Like, it's pretty low.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's good. So if you need something measured, talk to Brittany, because God knows if it wasn't a rectangle, I didn't like measuring it. So
I know.
just make sure whenever you pick one, it has like a lot of holly bushes out there for her that she can crawl around. And,
Yeah, I like to go and make sure they're like really close to the house.
yeah. All right. Anything else, guys?
Well, Brittany, if you can just email me your contact information that you would like them to have, I will forward them an email with all that stuff, and then I'll also put it in our group chat for our agents so that they know that they can contact you if they want to do private appraisals, etc.
Yep.
Perfect. And I'm always here for questions as much as I can answer, kind of like today. Sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't, but I'll try. So even if it's just a quick question anybody has, I'll do my best to kind of guide and help on my end.
I'll make sure we push his name out too for our sales meeting around Mike for both offices. He was very helpful. He answered the questions really well. So we do appreciate you. Anything else, guys, before we close?
Just
Helpful?
one more quick question. She probably said it before, but I missed it. I know sometimes you can get another appraisal if you don't agree with the one that was first given. Is VA the only one you can't do that with? Because they have specific lenders and that's it. It is what it is.
That I don't know because I'm not a VA appraiser. But I know with FHA and conventional, if you push the lender hard enough, I mean, they can get another one ordered, you know?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
All right, guys. Helpful?
Very.
Good.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yes,
You're
thank you.
welcome.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks, Brittany.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
And that's it. We'll talk to you guys. Several guys will talk to you Wednesday morning. Tomorrow morning. It feels like a Monday.
I know. I think I'm thinking it's Monday.
Charleston guys will talk to you Thursday. Come, as you know, need any help, let me know. And we'll, Mike will email everyone's Brittany's information. Thanks. See you.
Thank
All right,
you.
thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.